Hey, you guys, it's your host, Julian. This week I'm sitting down with Bob's Burgers background designer, Scott Moot. I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons that help support this podcast: Bill, Brent, Brittany, Eight-Legged Bird, Jacob, and Semantics. Thank you all so much for your support. It truly means a lot. If you want to become a member of our Patreon channel to help support this show and get all these episodes early and ad-free, follow the link below and sign up today. Now, let's get to that chat with Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cartoon Chronicles. I'm your host, Julian. Today I'm joined by Scott. Scott, man, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Julian, doing great.
Oh man, if anybody's doing great, man, it's us fan base as Bob's Burgers. I love. I told you a little bit before we hit record, man. I love Bob's Burgers. My family and I, we watch this show at least a couple episodes every night. That's like our comfort security blanket. That's how we nightcap at the end of the night, man. So I would love to know, how does Scott get onto Bob's Burgers? Take us back to that long time ago.
Well, it was kind of an easy fit for me, primarily because I worked with a lot of the people that were the first crew jumping onto Bob's when it was still just in development. Were people that I worked with on King of the Hill. So if you can imagine that, like after King of the Hill was canceled technically for its second time. Um, the crew of the show, the remaining crew of the show, and the people who ran the show kind of regrouped, and it became the company Bento Box. So when I heard that they were doing a new show, and it was in the vein of, or I don't want to cross reference here too much, but there was a lot of King of the Hill influence in the people that were doing it, and I knew the track record, and I knew how talented everybody was. So it was kind of I just said, where do I apply? What do I have to do? And there wasn't a test at the time because they had no material. It was still kind of being developed, and I was just eager to be a part of it, and I haven't regretted it ever since.
So I almost wore a King of the Hill shirt. King of the Hill. I
Oh,
didn't tell you this. So
yeah.
because I try to keep the division of shows, especially when it's something like King of the Hill. King of the
Sure.
Hill is my favorite animated show of probably of all time. Like when it comes to the adult side, it
Yeah.
is a perfect show. I mean, you can see Bobby Hill is back here. He's next
Yeah.
to Homer. He's throwing up the horns. I've rewatched that series 7 to 8 times. That was I have my because they didn't release season 7 through what was it 13 on DVD. They've never released those. They've only had the first 6 seasons. I burnt those DVDs out on all of my deployments. I would take binders like this
Oh, wow.
thick, right, with me, and I would just watch them and watch them and watch them. I've had so many of the guys, probably some of the guys you've worked with, from Sean Cashman to Clay Hall,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
Paul Scarlett. I mean, I've had a lot of those guys on my show, and like I said, King of the Hill and Bob's, they run in tandem for me because both of those shows were so perfect. The comedy, the timing, the editing, the writing, the artwork, just everything just one upped each other. So like I said, I want to get you on for a King of the Hill episode if you have fun doing this one, because I can get
Sure.
real nerdy with King of the Hill, man.
Okay.
It's disgusting how much I know about that one. But nonetheless, man, we're talking Bob's Burgers. So with you coming over from that King of the Hill crew, were you on King of the Hill until the final season?
I was. It was kind of an unusual thing where they technically ended it after the 10th season and then brought it back probably without anybody noticing that it had disappeared because it came back very quickly
Hmm.
for three more seasons. And the big difference was that we had kind of changed the format of how the show was being produced, changing to a storyboard format, and also producing the show digitally. So that kind of pushed to King of the Hill into the new era of digital, albeit 2D, but everything was done digitally. And so the the show ended after the 13th season, and a lot of us found other projects to keep ourselves busy. But as soon as I found out about Bob's, I quickly wanted to be a part of it. And I saw the pilot, and I saw the people who were working on the development. already, and I was I guess whatever I have to do, just sign me up.
So
And
with you being in the industry, that pilot is one of the strongest pilots and one of the best pilots I've ever seen of any animated series, right? So when you see something like this, you're like, damn, I got to work on it. Are you just sending emails to the people that you know that might be working on this? Are you reaching out to people within that small circle? How does that go about?
I had already reached out to my good buddy and who is the art director on the show presently, and he said that there would be an opening for a designer, and again I'd seen the pilot, I was excited about the characters,
Mhm.
and I love the style, and essentially the pilot is almost word for word the first episode,
Mhm.
the first half of the first episode, and then the rest of the story was created to finish the third and fourth act of the first episode. But yeah, it was all there. You know, I had a real good hunch that it was going to do well based on the pilot, and the characters were so much fun right out of the gate. So
What was it that stuck out so much to you about like, man, I got to really work on this show? Was it the characters? Was it the art style? What was it?
it was kind of both. I thought that the style looked really fun, and I already knew what the location was going to look like, and it was what it
Mhm.
was based on, and that got me excited. It's a fictional town, but it's based the look of the town is based on where Lauren, the creator of the show, had lived in San Francisco. The I don't know why I'm blinking out, but it's the famous neighborhood. I'll think of it later. But the style of the buildings were adapted to create a fictional East Coast town and Noe Valley. I'm sorry, it's Noe Valley, San Francisco. So we really took like the building, the streets, all of that, and took all of the little details and nuances and the fun stuff. I love throwing in all the little the street details, the buildings, the windows, all that kind of stuff. So I was already excited about that from an artistic standpoint. Getting to draw all that just sounded like a lot of fun. But the characters really stood out to me because I felt like they had a real close relationship, the family for sure. And also the deadpan delivery made me feel very much at home, uh, from the King of the Hill days, and it just everything about it worked for me. So and and it was such a great fit because again, it was restaurants, it was buildings, it was fun characters, very quirky sense of humor. Like I think that we were able to do things on a level, on a different level than other shows had done before. Very out of the box, but without being gross and like
Mhm.
shock humor. But it was like, introducing weird characters right off the bat, and like the Coochie Kopi and the Randy, the documentary filmmaker. All these kind of things were just like for a first season, so confident and so like we could felt like we could do anything.
Dude, it really felt like you guys, just watching this as a fan, especially going back and like rewatching it, you know, I told you before we hit record, I was in the Navy for a little while, and I'm coming off of my first deployment, and I see the pilot, and this is where I knew the show had balls, right? The first episode, the pilot, right? The first burger of the day. Do you remember what the first burger of the day was?
Wow, I really should know this. I'm not the best trivia student of Bob's, but yeah, I should know that. Go ahead,
Uh,
let me know.
so it's the, obviously it's the episode where they get shut down, human meat
Yeah,
possibly
yeah.
contaminated and everything like that. So Bob is out, and then Luis, he
Oh
literally says,
yes,
"Do not change it." Luis changes it to the child molester, right? Free
yes.
piece of candy. I saw that. I laughed so hard, and I was like, obviously 2011 is a different time than we are now, right? So it wasn't as sensitive as things tend to be now. You have to walk a little bit more of a line now so than you did back then. But I see that and I'm like, holy shit, they're going for it. Lauren and Jim are going for it. The animators and the writers and the voice actors, they're going for it. And I see this, and then I'm just enamored by the humor. Like you were saying, Bob's is the closest thing that I've been able to watch that's like King of the Hill, right? There's a couple shows that I've seen within the last decade that I can go, okay, these guys can stand toe to toe with the humor, the delivery, the amazing editing that the editing department does when it comes to joke to joke to joke. And that third one is the regular show. I don't know if you've ever watched that one. That was a Cartoon Network series. Phenomenal, man. That one got me back into animation. But I just remember going like, "Oh my God, man, these guys they're going for it. They're really pushing something." And then every episode from that first season felt like what the first couple seasons of The Simpsons felt like. It was just epic banger after banger after banger. Like every episode was fantastic. No wasted motion. The fat was just trimmed in every possible outlook on the show. With you being on that show, from fairly early on, like, what was it like those very early days when you're working on it?
It was fantastic. One, because I do feel like we had the sense that we could kind of do anything because it was a brand new show, and as you mentioned, the first episode really raised the bar
Mhm.
on just like
Set the bar.
outrageousness. And another thing that I want to point out was that there were a lot of similarities with King of the Hill, but King of the Hill really existed within the real world in that
Mhm.
we rarely saw any like fantasy or dream sequences on King of the Hill. So Bob's really opened up the possibilities of a lot of the characters have a very vivid imagination. You got Bob talking to inanimate objects. You got Tina writing in her erotic
Yeah,
fiction
fan fiction.
story, and Louise with her kind of maniacal like twist on everything. So there was a lot of room for going out of the box and doing fun animation that took us to a different place during the story. So that was really fun, and the characters were really evolving as well. Like every time they added a new character, it added some dimension to the show, and they also had to kind of work with the existing characters. So some of the characters and some of the storylines were adjusted along the way when it didn't seem like they were right, and it always worked perfectly. It always ended up exactly where we wanted it to be. Again, because I think we just had so much freedom. I know even being a background designer, I felt like we had a lot of freedom because it was such a new show, and so I felt like the world that we created was designed to look exactly like the characters would be in that world, and the humor was developed around those characters as well because they were quirky characters, and the stories were really off the wall for first season.
That they were. And I didn't get the chance to tell you this before we hit record, man. But backgrounds and animation are my favorite thing throughout animation.
Oh,
I
awesome. Yeah.
I love world building, and something that excuse me. Something that's so fun about Bob's is I'm gonna draw a lot of correlations to this in King of the Hill because like I said, these are just two top tier shows. These are two shows that make me feel the same. They make me feel happy every time I watch them. Like I'm not smiling whenever I've got one of these two series on, right? And there's like I said, there's so many similarities, like you were talking about how they're kind of rooted in the real world. King of the Hill more so than Bob's because they've got these whimsical and fantastic, what's the word I'm looking for? Just theoretical possibilities with
Yeah.
Tina, doing the things you were saying, and Luis and Jean and all these other characters. And then you've got the more sensible side and the more realistic side with King of the Hill. But there's, like I said, there's so many similarities here, man. And what I loved about both of these series was the background, the world building you guys were doing because, for so long I've thought about like, man, I really wonder what these secondary characters, not secondary characters in a bad way, but what are these other characters that aren't in each episode that you kind of see, skating by from time to time in a bikini,
Yeah,
or what is it, Speedo, or
yeah,
you see Mickey show up in one of the episodes. You see the biker gang in my favorite episode, Earsea Riders.
yeah,
So you see all of these characters, and you guys do such a great job at bringing all of these characters into this one world, and they inhabit and interact and mingle with each other like flawlessly.
yeah.
It's like almost like puzzle pieces if you think about it. It's like one comes in and then another one comes in. You're like, all right, this is going to be a little weird, but they fit like perfect. So when you guys are designing the world that is Bob's Burgers, man, what episode did you start? What was your first episode? And then what was like your first assignment for backgrounds?
It was actually the first episode, and before the show really actually had a launch. The first background I was drawing was Louise's classroom uh, when she's telling the class that her family has a restaurant that serves burgers
Mhm.
made of human meat,
Yeah.
and 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 we weren't officially hired, but I started doing some of the backgrounds actually drawn on in pencil on paper, just to have something that they could start with. Of course, we draw digitally on a Wacom tablet, but it was fun actually. Just drawing the style was again very familiar, um, but we got to improvise in a lot of ways that uh, we were creating a world
Hmm.
much like King of the Hill already had established, but this one was we never know exactly where it is. It's East Coast. It's some kind of, like New Jersey, some kind of, and I love the fact that we include kind of like regional dialect and accents, but it's not a place that you can pinpoint on a map. Uh, but the whole style of it really was designed to allow the characters to be at home and also have like all of their personalities represented very much, like, and the fact that the restaurant is like it's their business, and
Hmm.
they all have different attitudes about it. Obviously Bob just lets his dream, his goal, his everything he's all about, and the kids are reluctantly participating, and so yeah, just it was a fun adventure um, from the beginning. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine, man. And you see what I love like Luis has always been like my favorite character because it's just there's something about that chaotic evil, right? Throwing a Dungeons and Dragons term out there, that chaotic evil that she is. Yet as you see the series grow, you see her grow as a character as well.
True.
And one of the things like I've always pointed to, and I for the life of me I can't remember the episode this was happening in. But like her and Bob. I love Luis and Bob centric episodes because you get to, me having three kids myself, you get to kind of see like how not every kid that you have it can be like parented the same way. You'd like to say you'd be fair and equal across the board, but like
Yeah,
each kid is motivated differently. And you
totally.
see that within the show. I mean, you guys make like fatherhood so fun watching because it's like the hardest fucking job I've ever had in my life, right? I
Yeah,
try to do the best that I can with what I got. And then I see the interactions and you see the character develop and you see the love grow from the Belchers throughout this entire series. That's what makes this show so endearing is you could see how much they have each other's backs, right?
yeah,
One episode I always point to and like I said, for life, man, I just can't remember the name of this episode. But at the end of this episode, Bob kind of floats the idea of, or Luis floats the idea of possibly wanting to take over the restaurant after Bob has kind of like hung it up and stuff. But she's being very coy and she's like, no, I don't really want, no, who wants to flip burgers? Come on, So she's being very playful, but
yeah,
she's being sincere. And then that was like the first time I started to notice the seeds of growth for this character. This character was growing the entire time, like every other character. But you definitely see it's like Shrek says in the movie Shrek, the ogres have layers, right? You peel back one onion layer, there's another one. You just start to see that throughout this entire series. Um, when you guys are obviously you were working on that first episode, but when you guys are, early days, was there any edicts put out like, long-term game planning for like the characters, like growth wise or development wise or anything like that that you can remember?
I don't really remember that. I'm guessing that maybe the writing staff had some
Mm,
idea of where they wanted to go. I think each season kind of just grew maybe organically. That
yeah.
would be a good question for somebody who was on the writing team. Um, One thing that was really neat and very unique about Bob's is that when we started out, we were all under one roof, and it was a very
Mhm.
small building, so we got to know each other really, really well. Um, and being so connected to the writers from the beginning was very exciting. But the characters, I don't know. I think that they were so well crafted from the
Mhm.
beginning, but they definitely had room for growth, and they were so endearing with their relationship with each other, like you mentioned. That yeah, so I don't really know how to answer that question, but if I had to guess, I would say that they grew as the story writing grew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, one thing I love asking, especially when I get background designers on, uh, so this all stemmed out of a guy I had on way back in the day that was on The Simpsons. His name is Brad Abelson, and he drew some stuff in the background. So I'm always curious to like what you guys like sneak in. Maybe it's like initials or a date or somebody's name or something like that. So if you don't have one for Bob's, but you have one in your career that you can pull from that you really enjoy or you really think about fondly, is there anything that you might have snuck in the background that people might not have pointed out yet?
I have for sure. On Bob's, it's a little bit more difficult because the if we have a store name,
Hmm.
it usually goes through the writers because they're looking to make a joke that people could look at
Yeah.
during the episode. Um, but I've put say like one of my favorite episodes was the Shish Kebab, Bob driving
Mm.
a cab, and there's a couple of points in the rough neighborhood where I put a couple of my kids' names on and
Yeah.
graffiti on the walls. Um, and then another one of my from a design aspect, one of my favorite episodes and locations that I drew was the record store that Gene goes to when he has to replace his beloved uh, vintage Christmas record that breaks. And that one was fun because I got to put a lot of my record geek stuff in there and
Yeah.
specific records. But I also put some of my own little like things on stickers and posters and stuff like that. So that was we really do. It is a lot of storytelling and outside of the what the writers and everybody is asking for specifically in a scene, we do get to kind of drop a few Easter eggs in there from time to time.
Are your kids old enough to watch the show?
Oh yeah, they grew up watching it, and now they're basically grown
Yeah.
adults, yeah.
Have they picked out their names in the episode, or did you show them?
I did.
Yeah.
When when that particular episode aired, they were pretty young, and I pointed it out, more
Yeah.
recently. Hey, you're looking, there's your name. Uh, so that's always an opportunity to have fun. And,
What
yeah.
was their reaction when they saw their name pop up and they knew Dad did that?
With kids, they're usually in a text. They tell you, that's fire or something like that. So then you're like, yeah. So like,
Shit's lit.
all right, cool. Yeah.
That's pretty. That's pretty cool. I've got a 15-year-old myself. I've got a 15, almost 4, and then an almost 2-year-old.
Oh wow.
Yeah, widespread, man. We weren't supposed to have one, let alone three, and we weren't supposed to have one, let alone two. in less than 2 years towards the end of our baby making phase. But yeah, man, it's been interesting because the 15-year-old is at a completely different point in his life, obviously, because he's 15. The 4-year-old, everybody's at a different place. And, I'm starting to notice what you were just saying. I'm just getting texts with thumbs up or
Yeah.
fire emojis. And I'm just like, dude, come on. We're in the same fucking room. Just come over here and talk to me real
Wait
quick.
till one of your kids calls you bro.
Oh, he has. I was like, no, that's not how this works, dude.
Yeah.
Dad
Yeah.
works just fine. I'm not your bro.
I know.
But nonetheless, man. So that is something like I dropped a hint on that earlier, just to like how great you guys have for the family dynamic. Now, when you guys are designing the world that the family inhabits, and for you in particular, is there one like scenario or scene or destination location that you love putting the Belchers in more than another? And it doesn't
Uh,
have to be just the Belchers if it's a secondary character that you like playing around with too.
yeah. Let me think. I mean, it's fun when they go to new locations and
Mm,
we get to make up something totally fresh. Um, and I particularly like the neighborhood where they live, and I love when the side characters come out,
mhm.
and that's an awful lot of fun. Um, Wonder Wharf is
Yeah.
really fun. It's very challenging, and it seems like it's kind of always evolving, and we have to put a little bit more attention into one area or another area. But the funness of it is always there, and that was something that I think Lauren kind of brought to our attention early on, is that like we want to make locations that we would want to go to, like places that we would want to be there,
Mhm.
and Wonder Wharf is kind of like for the kid and all of us.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
if I think of something later, I'll bring it up. But the best episodes for the designers, like we love going to new places and exploring new parts it's a distinct region. And so every time we come up with a new location, it kind of has to make sense for where they live.
Mhm.
Like even though it's not specifically said, but it has to not stand out as like someplace that doesn't look right. It always has to be, even if they go to a new part of the town, it has to look as if it would exist, logically in their world. And sometimes that's a challenge because it's easy to write something in a script, and then it's a totally different thing to bring it to life and actually make it work. And I'm not saying that the writers are not on board, but sometimes in the story they have the whole thing figured out, but then when it comes time to actually draw it and make it visually real, then we have to kind of put it through a filter and make sure that it works as a Bob's World place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, before we rotate into the three episodes you gave me, is there any of the scenarios that the Belchers or any of the secondary characters have been in, whether it's at the high school, the wharf, maybe it's on which island, depending on, wherever you want to go, that was the hardest that sticks out to you the most?
Uh, the hardest for us to
Yeah, for you in particular, was there like one area that was just giving you a lot of trouble?
there was, and it was because it was the first time that we went to some place that we had to really work out like
Hmm.
the logistics of the place, and that was the taffy factory. When the kids go to the taffy factory, that was kind of the first time that they'd ventured out on one of their like wild adventures. And that was a very good example of like it made sense in the script. And when we heard the table read, this is the funnest thing I've ever heard. Okay, now you have to draw it. I'm like, oh, well, how do they get from point A to point B? And how are we going to stage this? And so that one was very challenging. But in the end, it really worked out well because I think the show is fun and silly enough that it doesn't have to make 100% logical
Hmm.
sense as long as the story flows. And I remember there was a few times where we were trying to figure out like how do we get the characters from this point to this point, and then there's this tunnel, and then how do they escape, and all these kind of things. And you draw it, and then we look at it in what's called an animatic video. So after all of the initial storyboard panels and the first animation is done, um, it's all compiled, and we watch it, and that's kind of how the network determines like is the pace working, are all
Hmm.
the jokes hitting, and it's really fun because that's the first time we get to look at it and say, oh yeah, okay, now it's really working. Like every angle, every staging, everything that we set up works well. And that was a really fun one. It's happy.
Yeah, I love how that episode from start to finish is just a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you brought that one up. I meant to ask you this like when we first started, about halfway through when we first started, but do you remember when you got on this show? Obviously, you've been on there for a very long time since the beginning, but do you remember where it all clicked for you? Because I have to assume, like Growing Pains, you're coming from King of the Hill, so it's a completely different style. But it's a little bit more grounded than a lot of the cartoons that are out there. It's not as wacky as like a Ren and Stimpy with the noodling of the arms and stuff like that. And everything is like real but cartoony. Do you remember where like everything just clicked for you though within the Bob's Burgers universe?
I think it might have been when I we initially the designers would split up the episodes, so one person would have the odd number and the other person would have the even number
Hmm.
episode. And I happened to get the first episode that featured Jimmy Pesto's restaurant interior, and that was a blast for me. And I really realized that this was the right place for me because it allowed me to draw on my restaurant experience, and the way that I was able to really be very creative in what I was able to draw in the restaurant, and really make it look like a restaurant that I would want to go to. Of course, it's supposed to be kind of a little over the top, a little cheesy,
Hmm.
and the cliche. It's gonna, kind of like a cliche Italian restaurant owned by a guy who's not really even Italian.
Yeah.
But that really it made me feel like this was definitely the right move for me.
So what do you think? Because we talked a little bit about this before we hit record. So what do you think was like probably the most vital piece of information that you had from your restaurant career that you got to put into Bob's?
Well, like for example, with pestos, knowing how to set up the restaurant with
Hmm.
there was a waiting area, there's a hostess stand, there's a little bar area. He we had It doesn't come up very often in many episodes, but we had designed like a little merch wall for
Yeah.
his goodies, and throwing in all the you know the all the things that visually make you're in a real restaurant, and adding some fun to it, and occasionally we get to like draw the interior of a kitchen. There was going to be an episode where we were going to see the interior of Jimmy Pesto's kitchen, and we never ended up using that. But anytime that there's a restaurant kitchen, I get particularly sensitive about like, okay, this should be here, and no, this is how it works. And but the restaurants are always fun, and Pesto's is probably the most fun because it was a specific style. And later on, we did other restaurants that either the family goes to, or like there was one where Bob was starting to hang out with other chef guys after
Yes.
hours, and being like, in the mix with all the local chefs. And that was fun. But yeah, it's fun for me because I get to revisit the time that I spent in restaurants prior to animation.
So for anybody that might be new listening to this one, I work, my day job is daytime sous, and then lead baker for my current restaurant. And what I love about Bob's, there's many things I love about Bob's, as you couldn't tell, just the character development, the fact that this family feels like a family, they argue, they fight, they love, they come together, and nobody is going to hit on a Belcher unless the other Belchers are there to kind of fight back. They really come together and form like Voltron at the end of every episode, man. So it's just something cool and wholesome to see. But the other thing that I absolutely love on there is spot on is the kitchen. The flow of a service, like how you see people interacting at booths and tables, how Bob works, how Jimmy Pesto works, how food is done in this show. As far as cartoons go, I don't think, unless it's like a specific show that is like restaurant based like Bob's, I can't think of one cartoon that is like knocked it out of the park when it comes to the intricacies of working in a kitchen. I
Yeah,
watch it and I use this analogy before we hit record. I'm pretty sure like Neil deGrasse Tyson will watch something like Interstellar and he'll like look at the constellation because I've heard him talk about this on his podcast. He's like, that shit ain't right. That the star is supposed to be over here. So I see that in a lot of movies, and most of the time I don't even think about it. I was like, creative liberties, right? But when I watch Bob's, I'm like, oh, somebody thoughtfully went through this, whether it was how they were holding a knife, how they were flipping something, what they were doing. There was no wasted movement when it came to the kitchen vibe, feel, and flow. Can you point to like anyone in particular? Maybe it was coming from Lauren, or maybe it was a lot of you guys probably had restaurant experience, but just like the storyboarding is great, the design work is great, the writing is great, how they talk about food is spot on, man. Do you know what kind of edict that might have been put down?
that's another one that I really wish I had a good answer for that. I don't know. I know Lauren did a number of things before doing animated programs, but he's just a real stickler for detail.
Hmm.
And he really loves to bring out the making you feel like you know where this is. This is a real place and real people. And I think like to me, what stands out is capturing not only the vibe of the kitchen, but like the zaniness of Bob and the cooking kind of requires a little bit of craziness.
Hmm.
And him like talking to a burger, before he
Yeah.
flips it over, like, or
Burger, a turkey.
yeah, or a turkey or his spatula, like all of it has a special relationship with everything that he touches and just that kind of like in order to pull off what you do in a kitchen, it's a little crazy but in a fun way. I mean, I
Mhm.
always had such a blast doing it, and that also comes through that like Bob absolutely loves what he does, and he wouldn't trade it for the world, even when he sees other people that are more successful. He applauds their success, but he's happy to do his own thing and so yeah, and then also the fun of like the whole family pitching in, and the kids are part of it, wiping down menus and filling ketchup and all that kind of stuff, which is really all the things that people don't see that it takes to run restaurants and
It is amazing. The little things like filling those ketchup bottles, filling
yeah,
those salt things. That's what I'm talking about. Those little things that you just assume, oh, these probably fill themselves. These
yeah,
napkins
yeah.
probably fold themselves. You know what I mean? So like I said, spot on from everything on the show. I can't point to one thing that I can say other than I wish I could have Bob's Burgers every day. You know what I mean? And I can with streaming. I can go back and watch it, but it was just there's just not one thing that I would change about this show. You know what I mean? From start to finish, backwards and forward, it's a perfect show in my opinion. Um, Now, with that being said, I wrote down some episodes, and you got some great ones. I would love to start with Bob Day Afternoon. However, you are the guest, so you gave me three, so we're gonna dealer's choice. You get to choose which one you want to start with. Shish Kebab, Hamburger Diner Theater, and then Bob Day Afternoon. Which one you want to start with?
Probably be best just to do them in chronological order. And I'm pretty sure Shish Kebab is the first in that list.
Hmm.
And again, each episode was just hitting such a great note and really pushing each one. And I happen to be able to work on the ones that not only did I have a blast drawing, but story wise are my favorites. Like
Hmm.
the cab one that all of a sudden we just got to know Bob as a character, and all of a sudden he's going out with a second job driving a cab at night, and of course he meets the night people.
Ladies of the Night, yeah.
Yeah, and so he has this whole separate world going on outside of the family, and it's really fun, and I had so much fun drawing this new part of town that we'd never seen before. And I really started to go back in my mind, and I relied heavily on like the neighborhood that I used to live. I before moving to LA, I lived in New York, and I lived on the Lower East Side, and like I was thinking of like what would Bob's world be with a little
Hmm.
bit of Lower East Side in there, and uh, and the characters were so fun, and the story. I love the way that the story kind of comes all together at the very end, and all the pieces wrap up so nicely. You got Tina with her birthday party that
Hmm.
Bob was totally against, but then he ends up getting a second job to pay for it. And he comes back, blitzed out of his mind and passes out underneath the soup uh, dispenser. And then and then he wakes up, and then it turns out that the night people, the prostitutes, know Jimmy Pesto across the
Hmm.
street.
They're
So
his
like,
best customer.
yeah, it's best friend. So all of these pieces come together so beautifully, and it's Tina's party, and the lights are turned off, and they have the disco ball, and so the humor, the pacing, the characters, everything about that one, I can just watch over and over, and just marvel at like how well it was written, and also how fun it was. I mean, like if
Yeah.
even if I hadn't worked on it, I would still say that's one of my favorite ones. But having participated and helped to make that environment was amazing for me.
You guys really, you guys set the bar, I think, without realizing like what it is to be a dad. It's
Yeah,
sacrifice, right? He goes and he does everything, and you guys hit so there's so many episodes that I can point to that I get emotional about. That one in particular because you understand no matter what those kids do, he says it in the first episode. He's like, I wish I could fire you all. You are all
yeah,
terrible, but I'm
terrible.
essentially stuck with you, right? You know, he goes and he's working on what, maybe an hour's worth of sleep to
Yeah,
help pay for his oldest daughter's party that means so much to
yeah,
her. He doesn't understand why it means so much to her because it's been so long since he was a kid and he's never been a girl, so he doesn't understand how special that is to her in particular with her and Jimmy Jr., but it's like you guys, like I said, encapsulated on what it's like to be a parent, but specifically a dad because I can relate to Bob. I can't relate to Linda as much as I can to Bob because I'm a dad, I'm not a mom. So it's like going the extra mile is like what I pride myself on for my kids just because I want them to have like everything that I didn't, but I want them to be able to earn everything that I didn't have too, right? So it's a very fine line. But you show Bob in a light of like it's not just like he's the funny dad or he's the dad that like he's got such great connection with his kids, but he's also willing to do what not a lot of people would do, and that's sacrifice his mental health when it comes to lack of sleep, his actual well-being when it comes to driving around the ladies of the night in a cab. I love the hat you guys put on him. It was just like all these little nuances that were just so great, man. But so hats off to you guys, no pun intended.
yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. You're right about the parenting, and I thought the scene where they say, "Well, honey, let us know what you want for the party. You don't have to tell us now, but think about it." And immediately Tina has all of the details already planned out in her head.
Hmm.
And Bob, every single thing is no, no. It's like he clearly is not on board with this, but the level of writing in that scene between Linda and Bob and Tina is just I was stunned. I thought, wow, this is so right on the money. And it set the tone for the rest of the episode because Bob, you know, he starts out being very much against it,
Hmm.
and he's so deadpan and so serious. But by the end, he's getting crazy. He's been
Yes.
this whole thing, and ends up shaving off his mustache even to add to Jimmy Pesto's trophy wall.
Uh-huh.
That's how far
Just to
he
get
would go.
Jimmy Jr. over.
Yeah, yeah. So that was another interaction that I just absolutely loved when Bob goes over there and Pesto says, "Yeah, I'll let Jimmy Jr. go, but you have to shave off your mustache and add it to my trophy wall." And when they gave me the task of drawing the trophy wall, there wasn't really much decided on that. So I just came up with the craziest things I could think of, thinking for sure they would shoot it down, but I'm going to try anyway.
Hmm.
And almost everything that I put made it in. Like they didn't blink an eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said, yeah, that's fun. We're going to go with that. Um, so that let me know right away that this is the place to be because like they're going for that. That's what
Hmm.
we're trying to show is that we'll put the craziness right in there. As soon as Pesto says my trophy wall, all I could think of was this guy's nuts. He's got to have like the most bizarre trophy wall back there. And of course, he wants to put a mustache in a bag up there.
It's such it's such a serial killer type of fucking move too.
And this all establishes, cements the relationship between Pesto and Bob as just being
Mhm.
like this ongoing, like just aggravating each other as much as they can.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that one is just fantastic. And then thinking, wow, that was just so brilliant. Where do we go from there? And then we just had, one after another. The second one that again I can watch over and over because I love when the scripts surprise us. Like we don't really know exactly where it's going, and then when we get there, we're just so happily surprised. Like when Bob finally again, he's very reluctant to allow Linda to have this dinner theater in the restaurant. But when he gives in, it turns out to be really fun and funny
Hmm.
until they get robbed.
Yes.
They get robbed, and and everybody thinks that it's part of the show. And Bob is like, "No, people, it's
He's
not part
literally
of
taking our money.
it. He's taking our money." He says, "Can you break it twice?" He's like, did you just get robbed? And the police even think it's part of the show. They're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, look, they added a robbery." Yeah,
You ever see that movie Superbad?
yeah, yeah,
So that's that whole police interaction. I don't know if that was like an homage to that scene, but that's what it reminded me of when McLovin gets punched in the face at the liquor
yeah.
store and the two cops, he's like, all right, just tell me when about this time he's trying to get the height.
Yeah,
That's what that whole interaction and exchange between Bob and the cops really felt like to me.
yeah. Well, that was a real strong theme early on with the writing was referencing movie, um, whether it be a location.
Hmm.
Uh, the Taffy Factory was kind of a little bit of Goonies going on there. So that was definitely a lot of jumping off point for early scripts were movies. Um, and and that later we do actually get Bill Hader as Mickey.
Yes. Mickey, yeah.
Who else? We've had other uh, well, not. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but Zach from
Oh, oh shit. It's Zach Galifianakis.
yes, yeah, and
Yes.
he originally did the voice for, pretty sure he was the voice of the guy that lived inside of the storage unit that Bob inherits. But he's the voice of Felix Fischoeder.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the characters that we get are just I mean the actors are fantastic. And we also have the luxury of all we're always present, the crew, the cast, I mean the artists, everybody at the table read. And so sometimes we get to see them do the first run at the table read, which is super fun. But yeah, we have great actors, great characters. Um, the 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 dinner theater specifically, there was a couple of extra fun moments for me, and one was that we were at the in the early days we were all in one room for the first launch meeting after the table read, and Lauren was typically fielding for ideas, and like almost every idea was something to be considered. And we were trying to figure out how we would have the fake blood that more more gets stabbed, and then the lights go off and then there's blood everywhere. It's shocking the customers who are, still eating their hamburgers. And if you notice, like Mort's doing kind of like this with like a squirt bottle, and it's squirting blood out. Even afterwards, you see blood. And and I just threw that out. I thought, oh, that might be funny, and it ended up getting into the show. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know they would actually listen to me. It wasn't a background element. It was just an acting thing. But there were some instances like that where it was such a collaborative process. I mean, it still is. Don't get me wrong, but the fact that it was a new show kind of meant everything was fair game. Uh, and then later when they tried to recreate the show, with a fake robber, which was Bob.
Hmm.
So yeah, every aspect of that episode I thought was just brilliant. And
Yeah.
in each of the characters played brilliantly in that story.
Yeah, everybody had their time to
Jane has
shine.
one line and she can't remember one line. It's like she just stands there
What?
going,
Ah, ah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the first episode where we find out about her
Nervous
issues
tick.
with nervousness. Yeah,
Oh man. So I've been trying ever since we started talking about this episode. I've been trying to think of the robber's name. Do you remember his name? I can't remember his name. And it's been bothering me ever since I wrote this and I literally just watched this episode. Fuck. It'll come up towards the end of the episode or right as I'm getting ready to go to sleep a little later tonight.
yeah.
I'll scream it at the top of my lungs and wake everybody up in the house.
So here's one thing I would also like to point out is like the first season and even the second season, the actual animating of the characters was still being really dialed in and
Mhm.
perfected. So the animators really relied on a lot of like cartoony, goofy. So like when the bank rob, I mean the store robber, the guy that robs Bob at gunpoint during the murder mystery play, that when he asks Gene to play him out, and Gene starts playing a little vamp, and then he kind of does a little shuffle with his legs like this, yeah, and a lot of that was just like they weren't able to do a lot of really elaborate animation, so that was simple and funny, like it
Yes.
was so
He
silly,
was
but
hamming it up. Yeah.
yeah, he was hamming it up on his way out with the gun,
Yeah.
and
That's what was so fun about this episode. It was a scene like that, and then him coming back in because they always say that, the what is it? The suspect always returns to the scene of the crime type of thing. And you guys played into that so heavy. You could tell the way he walked in, like, oh, that's the guy. And then
Yeah,
you hear his voice, like, oh,
yeah,
that's him. And he's got no mask on. And then he's just being avant-garde about it. He's sitting there like, you won't catch me type of thing. It was a very Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter-esque thing. Like, I'm
yeah,
too smart for you guys to get me. And Bob even points it out during the episode, like that's the guy right there. And they still can't pin it on him towards the end of the episode. And then him just wanting to be a Broadway actor, essentially. So this is his moment. This is his
yeah.
grand finale, whatever you want to call it, man. It's so well done, so funny from start to finish with this episode.
Yeah, it was also a little bit of a precursor to our next a bank robber who was
Mhm.
also kind of like he wasn't as successful. I mean, the first guy actually did rob and get away with it. The police didn't. But well, actually, no. Then in the first one, they do chase down and jump on the robber, if I remember correctly. At least that's the way
Wait,
it was.
which one with Bob Day Afternoon?
Uh, no, the hamburger dinner, the murder mystery.
Yes, I
Yeah.
believe they get him. I believe they get him at the end, but they also make a reference because these episodes are back to back, both Hamburger Diner, Dinner Party, excuse me, and then Bob Day Afternoon. So it's that one's first, and then Bob Day Afternoon. So they do chase down because Mickey had a second partner, Rodney or Rod. I can't remember.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think it's
Right.
Rodney. And he got chased down and his pants fell because that was a gag towards the end. He's like,
Yeah.
"Look, Bob, my pants are still up."
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that was again like the Mickey character was brilliant, and then the fact that he and Bob by the end of the episode they were kind of buds. They were kind of
Yes.
like Bob was trying to talk him out of it, and tell him to just give himself up, and of course there had to be a big production on the way
Mhm.
out, and so that one was extra fun because it was definitely based on a movie reference, but it all kind of went in a silly and farcical direction, where eventually you had all the townspeople camped out in front of the
Mhm.
bank, even like fish odor with a folding chair and a drink, hoping to find out, like how
With
they
a
could.
sippy straw, with a bendy
Yeah,
straw in his flask.
yeah, and all of it was just so crazy. And then uh, the Sergeant Bosco
Oh,
setting
such
up
a great character.
headquarters in the restaurant and having to deal with Louise, who wanted to talk. My daddy,
Dude, her kicking him in the shin and then him kicking her back. You
right?
know, I have to assume like everybody's felt like this. Like you get into an argument, not so much with your kid, but somebody else's kid, and then something like that happens, and you go,
Yeah,
"Oh, I wish I could fucking kick you right
yeah,
now."
yeah,
But
totally. But it worked on every level, and also that was an example of where the entire story was pretty much contained. There was no A story or B story. It was all happening all in the same location, even though that there was a little something going on in the restaurant where the police were set up and something going on inside the bank. Uh, but the kids were involved in it. Townspeople were involved in it. Everybody was involved in this bank robbery. And at the very end, that Mickey wanted to know what kind of grade Louise got on the.
oh, I didn't turn it in. She said you got an A.
Yeah,
We got an A, boys.
yeah. That every moment is hilarious. We also the split screen with all the people
I
talking
love
on
that.
the phone. Yeah,
It was
yeah,
so fun. So
yeah.
in particular, I'm assuming that's a storyboard shot. Or the storyboard artist gets that shot, those just connecting or what Brady Bunch
Yeah,
shot, whatever you want to call that shot.
yeah. I have a feeling that was written into the script as a like a conference call type split
Mm.
screen thing, but we hadn't done that uh, up until that point. And so storyboarding each one of those characters acting and reacting to each other would be, difficult as you want to get the reaction correct for each character as uh, but it just broke new ground because having all the characters talking at the same time and each one with their own, each one wants to see a different outcome like somehow. Bob's just hoping that he gets like the burgers,
Hmm.
in frame when he goes out there, and the kids draw some silly thing that doesn't look anything like a burger.
It's a fish, is what Tina said. And then Gene goes, "Oh,
Yeah,
it's a religious Jesus fish."
it's,
And then as you get out, the lady that owns the art supply store, "Oh, it's
yeah,
a misshapen penis."
yeah,
It was
yeah,
just gag after gag after gag on this one. I loved Luis and Bosco. Their interactions together were fantastic. But anytime Mickey is on the screen, like he steals the show, man. He is such a fun character, and he pops up through so many episodes, throughout the series. And whenever I see, Gail, whenever I see Mickey, a Mr. Fishoder centric episode, I know you guys are literally going to throw every fucking joke you possibly can at the
yeah.
wall, and it's going to be the craziest shit you're going to see through an episode, and you guys don't disappoint with Mickey. I love the episode or the part of this episode where Tina is worried about getting her money out of the bank and she
Yeah,
goes, "Mickey, I've got $87 in there." And he goes, "No, what you really, I see $200."
yeah,
So Gene gets the little remote control robot car to get his money out
yes.
and he spin him around. It was just so fun and just so fun. So I can't think of any other word.
It was also just an example of how we get to break out of the story and go into fantasy mode. That Gene imagines what robot college must be like,
It was a fun sequence too.
and it's all the typical college, hijinks and frat
Mhm.
parties. But one of the scenes is he walks in on his roommate, the robot,
Yes. Doing some personal maintenance.
personal maintenance, looking at the robot poster. Initially, that was one instance where we did have to tone it down a bit because I drew that one originally with like a robot version of the sexy bikini poster.
Yes.
And it was like a sexy robot in a bikini. And I think they thought eventually it was determined that that was too clear.
Hmm.
Better to leave it a little bit vague about what he was doing, and make it a copy machine. He
Yeah.
was kind of poster of a copy machine
And
of the
all
robot.
of the sides were opened up where you would load in the
Yeah,
trays. And the
yeah.
line he puts in there, "Doesn't anybody knock around here anymore?" is
Yeah,
so fucking funny, man. It's just like I said, you guys have these little like one-liners or just these, like
yeah,
I said, these little intricate parts that you put in there just make the episode perfect, man.
yeah. And that was again going back to the funness of working on a show that had characters with such vivid imaginations. And it didn't take much for Gene to just daydream and imagine himself going to robot college.
I love the scene where they're streaking, and I think it's like streak mode is
Yes.
flashing across the one robot's eyes. I think
Yeah,
that's what it
yeah,
says, or nude mode, something along those lines. Like I said, you guys hit like every like stereotypical thing a frat boy or a college scene would do
yeah.
in any movie you've ever seen, man. So, hats off to you for these ones. As we go through, these three episodes and talk about your time on Bob's, man. I have to imagine, you've been on there for damn near 14 years now. I mean, Bob's is going into its 14th year now. Um, you guys are Bento Box's longest, I think you're you guys' longest tenured show at this point now. So you've seen it at its humblest beginnings. You've seen it get as big as it's gotten, man. As you sit back and reflect, and as we start to wind down here, is there any one moment or any one memory, or any one point in time in Bob's that you were working on that, like, whenever you think of Bob's Burgers, that's like the first thing that comes to mind?
Uh, Probably the very, very first day and the first meeting and the first show launch.
Yeah.
The level of excitement, the shows that I had worked on previously were fantastic, and I was already a huge fan going as I got hired. So working on something that was brand new and everybody that it was a small crew, everybody was a pretty well seasoned, animation artist and could hit the ground running, and there was just such a level of enthusiasm and collaboration that yeah I remember that because it all of us, we were excited to be on a show, but not every show uh, is a success. So I remember getting hired on King of the Hill and talking to people on the show that I worked with that were there at the beginning. And a lot of them would say, wow, we didn't know whether it's going to be a hit or not. We were just kind of hoping. And so being on something right from day one that just felt like it had legs. It felt like it was going someplace. And there was uncertainty being a new show, but there was also the added bonus of being able to kind of almost make it up as you go. Like there was so
Yeah.
much that it was uncharted territory. So there was a lot of freedom and the whole team just went right for it.
Absolutely. You guys are still swinging for the fences, man, and you are crushing every pitch. I'm not a baseball guy, but you guys are crushing every pitch that's
Oh,
thrown at
thanks.
you. Now I love ending it with this question, man, because I think it's fun. I think it's fitting. And I know there's so many people out there that absolutely love this show just like I do, and there's people that love this show. This is their everything, right, man? I've never been a part of a fan base that for the most I don't think I've ever had one bad interaction with anybody that's ever liked Bob's Burgers or anytime the topic's approached. It's always from loving of this show, man. This is like one of the most solid fan bases I've ever been, able to be
Yeah.
a part of. Great fan base for Bob's. But when you think of Bob's Burgers in its entirety, and like I said, you've gotten to work on this, and you've had a huge part in a lot of people that love this show, right? Is there one word that might come to mind whenever I ask you, man, what Bob's Burgers means to you?
Wow, one word. Uh, I feel like we had, if I could put it in one word, um, as an artist, it was excitement. Like
Yeah,
we were excited to just every episode do something fun and different. And I don't know how to put it into a single word, but the sense that the characters and the world were zany and off the wall,
mhm.
but very real in that way. Like they were not off the wall in like a creepy or like, but just a very unique and different sort of way, but felt very real and very familiar and good. Like as you put it, you just wanted to see more. You want to see.
Yes. This is one of the most grounded cartoons I've ever seen in my life. This is one of the funniest cartoons I've ever seen in my life. This cartoon has moved me to tears on more than one occasion. You know, the episode that we talked about, the first episode we talked about where Bob is driving the cab, right? That is a very special father episode right there for me, and then you see, and I know we didn't talk about this one. It might have been the first Thanksgiving one, but it's essentially where no, it's the second. I believe it's the second one, but it's the one where the turkey keeps getting popped into the toilet, and then Bob
Yeah,
having to go down and get a new one. And Bob was subconsciously trying to work with or work through his oldest daughter Tina was getting older, and he was having the dreams of potty training all of her kids. That scene, like I'm trying not to fucking cry on you now, Scott. That
Uh,
scene is so impactful because, we are doing the potty training thing now with our second child. And then we'll be starting it pretty soon with the third one. So I remember, like, I didn't get to do that with my oldest because I was deployed for the first 4 years of his life, essentially. I had three deployments back to back, a 10-monther, or excuse me, a 9-monther, a 10-monther, and almost 11.5-month deployment, all within a 4 year, 4.5 year period, man. So I missed a lot of like first words, first steps, first runs, first boo-boos, first everything's, man. So getting to experience that, like the dad part of being raising kids, right? And then I get to see it on the screen, like, oh shit, there's other people that like go through the same shit I do. So I didn't feel like it was so isolated. Like I have a hard time with the kids getting older. And I know you mentioned earlier, like your kids are grown and you get a text message with a thumbs up says fire emoji. But it is a difficult transition because you go from these kids being in your life at such a young age, they follow you around like you're their hero until you're not. And it was just a very cool and very special moment to see in this episode with Shish Kebab. Him doing everything he could, and then the same thing. Like it's like you guys hit me at least 2 or 3 episodes every season where you guys hit me in the feels really hard, and that's something special for a show, man. So like I said, I told you guys at the beginning, I'm not a religious guy, but you guys are really doing the Lord's work with Bob's Burgers, man. So I can't wait to see anything and everything. It's been going on for almost 14 years now at this point. I hope for 40 more years of Bob's Burgers, man, because this show's got legs and it can go forever. Um, I hope you had fun on this episode, man, because I'd love to have you back on and we could talk King of the Hill if you want to come back on.
much. And I also would like to point out and kind of tag on to, you were talking about the fans, and this is by far the show that, and it's a benefit of the technology that we have with the internet and fan chats and web pages and all that
Interactions.
interactions that the fans are really really vocal, and we get to hear everything that they think about the show. And then for me, like going out and wearing, our Bob's gear, a t-shirt or something like that,
Hmm.
and hearing from the fans is really, really fun, because I've seen it grow from the time when, only a handful of people would know what the characters were on your shirt. I remember one time I was wearing the shirt with the silhouette of Gene's hairline,
Yeah.
and somebody said, "Is that Ringo Starr?" And but eventually, every people that I would run into would not only recognize the characters, but almost always say, "Oh, it's my favorite show. My favorite character is so and so." And so yeah, the fans are fantastic, and we really try to give back to them with fun things that they hopefully will remember either from previous episodes, or it will add to the new catalog of favorite episodes. And I'm pretty sure no show has ever done this, but we did the show completely based on fan art designs.
Really? Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was really like our tribute to the fans. I mean, they do that stuff for themselves for fun. They draw fan art all the time and post it. And so that was just, I guess it was the next logical step to in the crazy evolution of the show, to let the fans design. And that was very challenging on our part, because like we had to do the show basically as it normally would be done first, and then drop in the fan
Hmm.
art designs. So it was almost like three whole passes on the show to get it to where it was.
Well, like I said, man, this show is timeless. This show is going to stand the test of time. It'll be around long after we're gone, Scott, man. I don't want to be morbid or anything like that, but it's just this, like I said, I don't say this lightly. I've got a Mount Rushmore of shows. You've got King of the Hill, you've got Samurai Jack, you've got Regular Show, you've got Hey Arnold. And I know you're not supposed, we only got four on Mount Rushmore, but this is my fucking Mount Rushmore. We're putting five. Bob's Burgers in no particular order. Do not ask me
Oh,
to
right.
rank or rate those guys, but those five shows are like the most integral part of my animation viewership, right? Those five shows have put in morals, it's put in ethics. It's taught me how to interact, it's taught me how to talk to people, it's taught me how to engage with people. It's taught me what to do and what not to do in specific situations. I've taken things from every single one of those shows and incorporated it into my everyday life, man. So it's something that is special. And like I said, thank you for doing it. There's no better way to end this, man, than he's been Scott. I've been Julian. This has been the Cartoon Chronicles, and this has been another piece of your childhood. Good night.